Right, technical session number 44. Continuing our journey on security, we're going to talk about securing a workstation and best practices to go along with it. We're going to be talking about how we would describe how you would apply the 5 CompTIA best practices for securing a website, and this is CompTIA specific. So test questions probably. And identify common pitfalls to securing a workstation. With regards to this technical session, we want to take into account personal responsibility. Take ownership of your actions, both good and bad. Definitely, if something goes wrong, own it. But most people tend to forget also owning the good things. You know, if you're a part of a project and you were integral in that project's success, it needs to go on the resume. People know what you did. Also, customer focus, making sure that the customer takes primacy in what we do. Understand that without them, there is no us. If we do not have customers, we do not have a job. And it doesn't matter if those are internal or external. If our internal customers within the company roll their eyes and, you know, the last thing in the world they want to do is call the IT department to try to solve their problems, because we tend to make things worse. We're rude. You know, we don't really care about what their issues are. We're not going to be there very long. You know, all it's going to take is a new hire coming in with some good soft skills, and they're going to wipe the floor with us. Doesn't matter if they are more technically skilled or less technically skilled than we are. The fact that they have better customer service skills will put them head and shoulders above the rest of the team. So when people call in, they're going to be like, you know what? I don't want to talk to Avery. Give me Marvin.
Yep. For good reason.
You know, so always need to bear that in mind. And historically, people in IT are not known for having the best customer service skills. It has become a meme at this point. I would recommend watching a show called The IT Crowd. It really plays off of that trope pretty heavily. Also a pretty funny show.
It is very much British humor.
Yes, yes, I would say that. But it's in the same genre as like Parks and Rec and The Office and things like that. So 5 categories for best practices involved when you're securing your workstation. You got your passwords. What exactly constitutes a strong password policy? Account management, disabling AutoRun. That's a really big one.
Yes.
Data encryption, which we kind of talked about a little bit in the last technical session, and patch and update management, making sure if there are vulnerabilities to your system that are discovered, making sure that in a timely manner you download these patches and upgrade them. As we had mentioned before, things like 0-day attacks, they are considered to be active until those patches are resolved. And there are some 0-day vulnerabilities that have been active for years that they just never bothered with patching. See, securing a workstation, I believe that is in the main security one. I believe that still falls under chapters 23 and 24, Ramsey.
Kelly, do we have time for Tajma?
Yeah, let me pause the recording. Let's talk about this. All right, passwords. What are some best practice policies that we can put in place? Why is Marvin not here for this? This is his moment to shine. So, password policies that we can put in place to ensure the most security for, you know, our systems while not making things overly onerous for our employees. Standard practice typically says 8 characters. However, that's becoming easier and easier to crack. So they're recommending at least 12. Because with 8 characters, you can just pick random words. It could be your dog's name, could be the company you work for, could be your kid's name, you know, things like that makes it a little bit easier. 12 characters gets a little harder to do stuff like that. So as Avery was talking about, you know, earlier, as well as Mark, use pass phrases rather than pass words. It's harder to pick out a phrase than it is a word, and then you can integrate some special characters throughout it, like a line from a favorite movie, a line from your favorite song, something that is easy for you to remember. It could be from a book, you know, just something like that where it is multiple words put together. Also, I heard somebody say that like putting a space at the end of it is a good thing to do because hashing algorithms have difficulty with it. But it still requires, and even if, you know, so when you get the hashing glyph, it'll still show a space at the end. So it's harder for people to recognize it. So adding a space at the end is another way you can do. You can add just another character with a little bit extra security for it. Combining uppercase, lowercase letters, special characters, and numbers. So if you think about it, if you just, you know, do lowercase, what is it, 1 in 26 for each character, you do lowercase and uppercase. So you do 26 times 26. It goes up a little bit more, you get special characters, and it's 26 times 26 times, you know, what is it, 15 special characters, and then you add numbers, so you get 10 more, so it's 26 times 26 times 15 times 10. You know, so you start to see it becomes exponentially more difficult with each, you know, piece that you add, as well as the possible combinations with each character you add. It grows exponentially. Did you get to this chapter yet in Network Plus, Avery?
No, but I do
Okay.
have a good video to share
Oh,
whenever
you do?
we get a good stopping point.
Oh, for passwords?
Yep.
Okay, so as soon as we get through passwords, we'll watch that video real quick. Is it like 5 minutes or so?
It is 2 minutes and 57 seconds.
Oh, perfect. I like that. All right. So use at least one symbol in your password because that adds complexity to it. Don't use consecutive letters like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, things like that. QWERTY doesn't work, like Marvin talked about the guy he worked with that ran his finger across his keyboard and that was his password. Real quick and easy to get in, but it's also real quick and easy for somebody to figure out what you're doing. Don't use your sign-on name as your password. Don't use password as your password. And they try to avoid using words that are in any language because of dictionary attacks, where they're going to be using most common words first. And it doesn't matter if you think, oh, I'm in America, I'll be slick, I'll use Portuguese. Dictionary attacks will take stuff like this into account. So, and don't use the same password for multiple accounts just because it's easier. It's like, you know what? Avery likes to use, you know, Marvin 542321 for his passwords, you know, but he only likes to use it for all of his bank accounts. But for every bank account, he uses the exact same password. So, but that opens you up to risk because if they can discover one password, they're going to attempt that password against every other account you have and learn how to use that to gain access. So if one password becomes compromised and they know other stuff that you use, they can try it across a multitude of other things.
Yep.
All right. Best practices for passwords continue. You want password expiration. Sometimes we find that really awesome password and we want to use that password for eternity. It's complex. We got it hammered down. I don't want to change it. I know what it is. Well, the longer you use that password, the more likely that it is going to be discovered. And even after being discovered, the longer amount of time that they have to actually utilize that vulnerability against you. So we need to set password expiration, typically about 3 months. would be how you would set it. So you set these regular intervals that your employees will have to change passwords on everything. Depending on how secure an area you're working with, like if you're working in, with Department of Defense and it requires, certain security clearances, you may have to change your passwords once a month, once a week. All depends. Or some of them, it may be daily, at the highest levels. Now, you also may be prevented from using older passwords, so they may have a password history. The last company I worked for, you couldn't use the same password that you have used in the last 13 attempts or something along those lines. It remembered back that far. So in 3-month intervals, 13 attempts, that can be quite a long time for you to get back to using that password. So some employees try using certain tricks to get around that. We'll get into that too. Changing default usernames and passwords, like on your routers and all that, stuff. You want to make sure this is the first thing you do when you turn something on before you get into networks and stuff like that, because if anybody knows the make and model of whatever you're using, they can quickly and easily figure out what the generic administrative passwords are, sign in, and gain full access to your systems. BIOS and UEFI passwords, these are always good to have in place because, well, some people have just enough knowledge about computers to be very destructive. So they know how to get into the BIOS. They may know how to change a couple things, but they go in there, they mess around with a few things, and they completely intentionally or unintentionally disrupt or cause havoc within your systems. So you want to make sure you have a BIOS password or UEFI password in place in order to better protect your systems. How do we get past that if, say, a disgruntled employee has implied a BIOS or UEFI password? How do we bypass that?
Remove the CMOS battery.
Remove the CMOS battery. What's the other way?
Move the jumper.
The jumper. So you can either use the CMOS battery or the jumper. There's a little pin that you can use to reset the CMOS battery right next to the battery itself. So that allows you to bypass it. And in order to kind of prevent employees from going in and doing that very same thing, you can actually use physical locks on the towers, case locks, to keep people from getting inside them. Yes, Rienzi.
Did you just say that if you want to get around this BIOS UEFI password, you can just do it that way with the jumpers? That's what you meant? Oh.
You can either remove the CMOS battery, or there's a little jumper pin you can use to, you depress it and it resets the flash memory.
Okay, I haven't seen one of those jumpers yet. Is that like a little, is it like a mini resuscitation thing or what?
It's like a little pin sitting right next to it inside on the motherboard itself.
Oh, it's in there. Oh, you don't have to, not a piece of equipment you bring, it's in there.
Yeah, no, there's it's inside on the motherboard itself.
Oh, okay, thanks.
No problem. So, and then again, to prevent employees from doing this themselves, you put locks in the case so that they can't open the case. There's also like a special tape you can use to see if it's been tampered with. And some of them have case alerts on them, to where if the case is cracked, it will send an alert saying, the case has been opened. So there's that. Screensaver passwords. You should lock your workstation every single time you get it from your computer. If you're ever leaving your computer alone, you should lock your workstation. I have worked in places where if anybody did not lock their workstation, pranks would be played on you instantaneously and ruthlessly to remind you that you need to lock your workstation. They would change your mouse settings, make it a left-handed mouse versus a right-handed mouse, change your keyboard settings so that it's a Dvorak keyboard versus a QWERTY keyboard. Just go in there and mess around with all your settings to make life miserable. And it served two purposes. It kind of kept things a little bit light in the office, but it also reminded us about security so that we would lock our stations whenever we got up. Same held true for our phones. When I would go to branch managers meetings, goodness help you if you left your phone unlocked on the on the table when if you got up for a break. They would start sending emails to higher ups in the company underneath your email signature that were not pleasant. So, but again,
That's why Kelly is now a teacher.
yeah. I was thankfully warned about this before I went to my first meeting, and my mentor was like, don't ever leave your phone out. Keep it on your person at all times. Like, okay. But I saw branch managers who came in and had unpleasant things sent to their bosses and things like that. So, but again, it helps promote security, because you don't want somebody leaving their phone unlocked open on a table when they go up, at a restaurant, when they go to the bathroom or something like that. Somebody can come over and basically forward critical information to themselves and or gain access or walk off of that device. And now that it's unlocked, they have full access. So screensaver password is a way that kind of can fail safe that. And so you can set it to turn on after about 5 minutes. And then it requires a password to be able to unlock it. And then a slightly more secure method of sign in requires the user to press Control-Alt-Delete and then be able to sign in, rather than just having the sign in screen open and available immediately. I understand it's only 3 keys, but it's still considered to be more secure. All right, next. These are policies that must be in place. So we had password history, which you can set the number as high as you want. Normal default is 0, so the person can keep reusing the same password over and over again. My old office, I told you it was 13. You can have it as high as 24. So they have to go past 24 passwords before they can reuse that original awesome password that they came up with. So you have a maximum password age, typically set 42 days. The company I was with, it was 3 months. And then here's where minimum password age comes into play. So one of the ways of getting around the password history is somebody would continue to reset their passwords over and over and over again until they get back to that awesome password that they like. So if it's 10 times, they would just keep resetting their password until they got back to their original password, and then they would leave it. Because they don't want to remember anything new, they just, I have my password, it's an awesome password. I've been using it for years. I use it for all my accounts. Why can't I keep using it here? So minimum password age comes in. It means each password that is put in place must be held for a minimum of X amount of days. So you could set it for 10, 15 days. So if you set it for 10 days, and then there's a 10 password history, it's going to take them 100 days just to get back to that original password. Most people don't have that kind of drive to continually push for that. So they may just deal with what they got at that point. So that's where the minimum password age comes into play, is to prevent people from cycling through and getting past the password history portion of it. Then we have minimum password length, anywhere from 0 characters up to 14. Optimal at this point is 12, although you can go much longer than that. If you can think of a really long sentence from a line in a movie or a story, a song or something like that, and that's something you want to remember and type in every time, hey, the more characters you have, the more secure it is. And then you would have complexity requirements, where it would have uppercase, lowercase, numerical, symbols, non-sequential, like you can't put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the end of it or something like that. So it can't be sequential, it can't be A, B, C, D. It'll pick up on that and say, no, sorry, that does not qualify. If any of you ever, signed up for a new account, like with Amazon or something like that, and you're putting in your password and it has that little symbol at the bottom where it's like red, where it's a weak password, and then it'll turn yellow when you hit a certain level of complexity, and then green when it says it's a good, secure password. So that's where the complexity requirements would come into place. Questions so far? All right, let's go ahead and pause. All right. There we go, moving along. Restricting user privileges. We talked about this one a couple days ago. I think it was late last week, about the principle of least privilege. Only give them access to the absolute minimum they need to be able to perform their daily tasks of their job. Assign the permissions by group rather than individual users. And make users members of groups as they change roles or positions. You would change them over. And again, you may have a slight period of overlap, but you also have to remember to expire those old permissions. Because they may not necessarily need that level of access. Login time restrictions. This is one people don't often think about. So if you work 9 to 5, and somebody's trying to log into your account at 10 o'clock at night, that should be a huge red flag to the company. Granted, I know more and more nowadays, companies want you to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, log in once you get home, okay, eat dinner, and then get back to work. Maybe the case, but for the most part, if your company is security minded and they don't want employees working if they are not there, they will do a time restriction on when logins happen. And if you are going to change shifts for a short period of time, like say I'm on call this weekend, so I need to have access, you would need to notify IT. IT would then update the permissions to say for the next month, you're on call every weekend, you would have access to log in during those weekends, but then that would be shut off at the end of that time period. So, questions with regards to login time restrictions and restricting user permissions. All right. We mentioned this one a couple times. It's always good policy to disable guest accounts. If the account is not needed, it needs to be disabled on the system because it gives you less of a surface area for attack. Now, any other accounts you have, you need to rename them. You cannot rename an account to administrator, but you can name it in such a way that you recognize it yourself as administrator. You know, like Marvin's, you know, like Marvin is the boss. You know, that's his administrator account. So, you know, he may put something in like that, so you know it's the administrator account. Typically, you would want it something where you could identify it as the administrator account and other people couldn't. So I wouldn't suggest that one. That's just the one he likes on his personal computer. I don't know why. So finally, change your passwords, obviously, from the defaults. Don't have an administrator account with no password, because that is
Just not.
I would
secure.
typically, I mean, before the conversation today, I would have said that was not secure at all, but apparently it thwarted everybody who was trying to get around it. So maybe all you needed was a 5-year-old to come in and go like, you just do this and you're in. All right. Failed attempts lockout. So you want to have this set to however X many attempts your account is getting locked out. This will prevent online brute force attacks, things of that nature. It's typically set to 3, and it can be auto re-enabled after a set amount of time. So it could be an hour, it could be 3 hours. Some people set it to where you have to call IT and have it reset no matter what in order to get back in. And to a degree, there is an argument for that, because if every night somebody's trying to access that account and they only get 3 attempts a night, so they're going to be going for high quality password attempts, but every single morning you come in and you're locked out of your account, that would alert them that there is a ongoing attack happening that they need to monitor. In which case, your IT department could set up a honeypot or a honey net in order to try to figure out what the attacker is after, try to, you know, figure out who they are, you know, and gather more information, so to speak. All right, that's failed attempts lockout. Timeout screen lock. So if you step away from your device and you don't lock out, at least have it set after like 5 minutes or something like that. It goes ahead and locks your account out. Granted, 5 minutes is a lifetime in security. If you've walked away from your desk, somebody can immediately just roll over, get whatever they need to done, and, get back to their desk. And unfortunately, with regards to the logs, it's now on you. So regardless of what has occurred, you will be responsible for it. So locking your workstation every time you get up, I understand it can be a hassle. Like, I was just walking to the kitchen to get some water, it was like 20 steps away. I was going to be right back. I just didn't want to log out and log back in. Well, that's when things occur. Or I was just running to
That's
the
when your
restroom real
kids will
quick.
put you on parental control. They won't
Yes.
tell you the password.
Or in the case of my kids, they'll want to come in and take over the class. Thankfully, that hasn't happened in this cohort yet.
Yeah.
We still have a few weeks. All right. So, and that's also where the password protected screensaver comes into play. So when you come back, you have to put in your password to log back in. Although they may have an auto log feature at an hour. So if screensaver's been on for about an hour, then it will automatically log you out of everything. And then you have to log back in and re-authenticate with single sign-on in order to be able to proceed. Questions so far on this? All right. Disable auto run. USBs are one of the nastiest devices you could possibly have with regards to security problems. One of the quickest ways hackers try to get into any company or any system is they drop 1 or 2 USBs outside the doors of companies. Why? Because people will just pick them up, plug them in just to see what's on them. Once you've done that, it's auto run files onto your system. Ta-da, your system is now corrupted. So in an enterprise setting, you want to disable auto run so that if any drive is plugged into your system, it does not automatically run whatever is on that drive in order to enable it. If ever you receive a USB as part of a promotion or free or what have you, I mean, some people, like, instead of handing out CDs with their music on it, they're just handing out USBs like, yeah, just plug this in and it'll put it in your iTunes. Hackers have used these methods to try to get into people's systems. They'll put some random techno music on there. They'll upload a virus onto it. You plug into it, and now they've got, access to your systems, and they can, add ransomware to where you have to pay them to unlock it. It could be gaining bank account information. It could be, if you're doing this at your company, it could be access to your private files in your system. USBs are very dangerous. Only plug, the only ones you should be plugging in your systems are one that you bought at the store.
And I actually saw this through a lockpicking lawyer video where
Great YouTube channel, by the way.
Yep. He picked a lock and the reward was a USB. And he made a PSA, public service announcement, that even with like disabling auto run, there are some USBs that aren't actually like storage devices and just have a bunch of capacitors on it. And so what will happen, you'll plug it in and it'll charge those capacitors up and then destroy your computer.
Oh, that's nasty.
It's nasty stuff. And I would argue it's probably unlikely that it'll just happen to you, but it is another reason to not just plug in random USBs that you find. Like,
yeah,
you need to make sure that you acquire them from
a known
reliable
source.
places, known
Again,
reliable sources.
Amazon, not a known reliable source, because individual people can sell USBs on Amazon acting as a store.
Yeah.
So we're talking about going to a big box store like your Walmart's, your Targets, your Myers, or whatever, and getting it from there a known good source. No, the honeypot, I just used that as an example as a possible counter to try to figure out who the hacker was if you were getting repeated failed attempts at night. Some companies may just block the IP addresses to where they're coming from. I just offer that up as a possible course. Yes, well, Tajman, we have to understand the high price of paying too little. So there is an interesting story with regards to USBs. Let me see if I can pause here. Onward. Next, data encryption. We talked about this in the last one, utilizing things like BitLocker and EFS. Unfortunately, with this, like we talked about many times, you have to balance your security versus convenience. The more encryption and the more robust encryption you are utilizing, the more processing power that's going to require, which is going to slow down your systems even further. So you have to find that level that works for you, that security versus convenience. And here they put it as security versus usability. So every time you would use, move, save, whatever, it would have to either decrypt or encrypt those files each time. That takes processing cycles. That will slow you down if your system can even handle it at that point. If you try to encrypt absolutely everything, your system can become near unusable. So, patch management and updates. Patches and updates are used in order to either add some additional functionality, fix a vulnerability, or essentially close a security issue or fix something that doesn't work. These are essentially called hot fixes because they come out as soon as they're available. They're not on a regular schedule. It's as soon as they're available, they're pumped out to everybody so that you can use them to fix whatever ongoing issues going on. You see that a lot with rapid vulnerabilities. Tajman was talking about the most recent update from Apple. I do have questions on that, but you know, that would be an example of a hot fix. It would not come out as a regular scheduled update. Was it Microsoft that had update Tuesdays? Like every Tuesday they had an update,
I think it was like every other.
something like that.
Yeah.
Although it didn't matter if you turned off your Microsoft computer for like a week, you'd come back on. There's like 50 updates.
Yep.
Now, for best results with patch management, your system administrator could deploy an automated system that would check for downloads and make them available for all systems. However, in reality, some of these patches or system updates may affect homegrown systems you already have in place. So updates and such may need to be tested in a sandbox environment before being deployed to make sure you do not affect operations. This was something Marvin did on a regular basis with his previous job, where whenever updates would come across, he would make sure, because you don't want the X-ray systems and stuff like that that the medical professionals are using to stop functioning, because that actually could cost lives. Yeah. So, you know, they had to make sure this stuff was fully functional before they would deploy it. Now, if you wanted to automate the process, you could use the Windows Server Update Services, and you could manage that process as much as possible. Maybe only allow hot fixes to come in, but for major updates, those do not get deployed immediately until after testing. So you can set what level you wish at that point. Questions so far? All right. Here's some common pitfalls to securing your PCs. Forgetting passwords. Who has not forgotten a password? Anybody here got a mind like a steel trap, never forgot a password in their life? And it doesn't count if you've only ever used one password in your life. So thankfully, this is a relatively easy fix. For the most part, this has been automated in, I'll allows for, some form of recovery. Obviously, the worst case scenario on this is if an administrator forgets their password, because then that can cause a cascade effect down through the systems. So as an administrator, you're held to a little bit higher standard. So you have to come up with a really good method for memorizing passwords or passphrases. And maybe talk to Marvin about the Mind Palace, because he was unknowingly employing some of those techniques in his normal studying. Has anybody ever heard of that, Mind Palace? All right, we'll talk about that briefly when we're done with this. It's kind of an interesting concept. So anyways, next one, too much encryption. Too much encryption will slow the performance of the PC, slowing down everything you're trying to do. So with that in perspective, we want to only encrypt the most sensitive things possible. Again, we don't want to encrypt our fantasy football picks, but we do want to encrypt the personally identifiable information, or PII, of our employees. So not everything needs maximum security. All right, updates and patches. Not every single patch that comes across will improve your security. Sometimes it's just repairing a bug in a system that was like causing the app to crash or something along those lines. So be sure to do your due diligence before installing these patches to see if it is something that is immediately required or if it's something that needs testing before it should be implemented itself. So, questions, comments, concerns?
I posted a Wikipedia for it
Oh, the Memory Palace, the method of loci.
in case anyone is interested.
The moment I have free time, I'm going to try to learn to do it. Just waiting for that moment of having free time. It's always after the next cert. Okay. Now, we should be able to describe how you would apply the 5 CompTIA best practices to secure your workstation and identify common pitfalls when securing workstations. As we increase security, we decrease convenience, and always need to bear that in mind.